A Passion for Mushrooms by Chronological. Chapter 12. Friendly Confessions. The first time Bilbo Baggins remembered meeting Lady Dis, he thought she was a nurse. To be fair, he opened his eyes in a clean sick room with white linen sheets. He knew he was in Dale because the morning sun was shining on a bell tower clearly visible from his window. It was a little cloudy, but otherwise a nice enough day. The mystery was why Bilbo would be in a sick room in Dale at all. Bustling quietly about the room was a dwarven woman in a light blue dress, rolling bandages, folding blankets, straightening bottles on the end table, and doing a number of other small tasks. She paced around to the outer edge of the room, never glancing at Bilbo. After a few minutes of this, he gave a polite cough. "I don't suppose there's any chance of a cup of tea?" She looked up at him in surprise. "Master Baggins, you're awake." "Indeed, my good woman, and incidentally quite ravenous. Did I miss breakfast?" Cocking her head to one side, she said, "I'm sure something could be arranged." "Excellent, excellent," he said, just remembering to call a thank you after her as she went to fetch him something. In a few minutes he had a lovely hot cup of tea and a bowl of porridge with chopped mushrooms and cream. Once again he thanked her kindly before tucking in. "Do feel free to sit down and have a little something yourself," he added with a friendly wink. "I shan't tell anyone." Her mouth quirked a little in amusement beneath her intricately braided beard, but she did take a seat and a cup of tea. Very politely, she let him enjoy his porridge in quiet for several minutes, only sipping at around tea as they both took in the sunshine and the fresh air from the window. "Master Baggins, I must ask," she said eventually, "do you know where you are?" "Dale, of course," he said. "The bell towers are a bit of a giveaway. I suppose I was injured and could have been moved, but Thorin wouldn't trust a human healer." Arching a thick black eyebrow, the Dwarro dame said, "An accurate supposition?" "I have a bit of an advantage when it comes to guessing," he confided. "My head feels like it was hit by a boulder." "Not a boulder," she said. "You took a blow to the skull yesterday afternoon, and it was determined that you should convalesce in the closest available bed, which was here in Dale." "Yesterday? It must have been some blow." "It was." Her mouth set in a firm, thin line. Without knowing her well, Bilbo couldn't be sure, but he thought she looked upset. "You must be quite the healer if Oin entrusted my care to you," he said, trying to cheer her. "I'm terribly sorry for not asking sooner, but I'm afraid I didn't catch your name." "Dis," she said. Bilbo started from the bed as though a troop of goblins had broken through the door, but she caught him about the shoulders and pressed him back with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" she demanded in alarm. "I was attempting to bow," he said uncertainly. "Do not." Her voice was a low growl, and her hands upon Bilbo's shoulders seemed very strong to the little hobbit. Once he relaxed obediently back into the bed, she released him. "I am the biggest fool in the world," Bilbo sighed, staring up at the ceiling after her face vanished from his view. "You would have moved more and suffered few ill effects," she admitted grudgingly. "But it would be best to lie still. You must not get up without reason." "Without reason?" He turned to face her. "I ordered you to fetch me tea like a servant. I thought you were a nurse. You!" The grin that split her face was vicious and victorious. It made Bilbo wonder miserably how he had failed to realize she was Thorin's sister at once. "You remember that?" Even her voice sounded like his, that low rumble he gave when he was pleasantly surprised, though hers was scaled an octave or two higher. "Of course I remember that." Closing his eyes, he dropped his head back to the pillows miserably. "I am not likely to ever forget it." "You might be surprised. What's the last thing you remember before waking up this morning?" That is a fair enough question, the sort healers always ask when someone took a head wound, so Bilbo sat up to meet her eyes and answered honestly. "I suppose it must have been yesterday morning. We were all riding out to surprise you on the road from Esgaroth. Having never ridden a goat before, I was making quite a fool of myself. Bard offered me a pony, but in my pride I refused it, ridiculous as it may seem. I rather intended to impress you with how dwarvish I could be. I did so hope we might be friends. I suppose Pebble threw me." Watching those icy blue eyes soften into warmth, only to harden again into a stoic distance, reminded Bilbo uncomfortably of Thorin. This time the resemblance was less pleasant. "The goat did not throw you," Lady Dis said harshly. "Your injury was my doing and no other's. I struck you." The world swirled around Bilbo in dizzying confusion before coalescing into sense once more. "If I offended you, my lady," he began slowly.
"You did not."
He blinked. "Then I must admit I am at a loss to understand the situation you describe."
"I have had letters,"
she said, then halted. "Yes," Bilbo said encouragingly. "I know Fili and Kili have sent you ravens faithfully. Balin keeps a regular correspondence regarding the journey of your people, and Thorin dashes off the occasional missive. All of them have kept me apprised of your welfare."
"As they have written me about you,"
Dis said before stopping abruptly again. This time Bilbo waited to see if she would speak further. Eventually she did.
"Kili wrote that I must not judge you by your size, but by your heart. That you were a true warrior, unafraid to face a dragon, an army, or a mad king. My old son gave you even greater praise, naming you his savior and a deadly fighter. What Balin wrote to me is known to all of the wandering children of Erebor, that twice you put your own body between the pale oak and my brother, shielding Thorin when nothing else would. As for Thorin, he practically begged me to greet you as I would a dwarf of high standing, reminding me in letter after letter that he had granted you land within Erebor and a title of lordship. It was clear, very clear, how much you meant to all of them."
When she said nothing further, Bilbo fidgeted a bit with his bed linen, smoothing the wrinkled places. "Well, I would not complain if you were disappointed by the reality after they said such things of me. I am only quite a little fellow after all."
"Lord Baggins, I was not disappointed by your aspect. I simply, rashly, decided to greet you as family."
Bilbo felt his chest puff up importantly, the way it did when Thorin asked for his opinion or Bamber gave him some little task for the promotion of their guild. "I shall endeavour to prove worthy of such regard, my lady, and hope that in the future you may see fit to do so once again." She stared at him in disbelief.
"That greeting clearly injured you more than I thought."
Understanding rose within Bilbo's mind like the dawn. "You mean to say you knocked heads with me as Balin and Dwalin do?"
"Yes."
"Then I am quite lucky you did not bash my brains in." Bilbo laughed in relief. "How strange that we should both have been so anxious to meet one another." After a few seconds, the princess started laughing as well, a rich, deep chuckle that filled the room.
"You will have me do it again."
"Oh!" Bilbo giggled. "It is my honor to be struck by a member of the House of Doran." Then he laughed until his belly ached and the pain in his head became too much. Slowly Dis calmed down as well, at least enough to answer.
"Shall I tell you how many times you offered me such
honors?" She snickered. "Whatever do you mean?" Bilbo sighed, one last little titter escaping his amused grin.
"You did not remember,"
the princess said. Her face was serious and expressionless once more, but her eyes were gentle where they had once been brittle.
"You were alert, which we all knew to be a good thing, and you knew yourself, which was even better, but you were confused in your mind. You did not recall what was happening from one moment to the next."
"Oh dear," Bilbo said, feeling another laugh coming on. "How many times did I introduce myself to you?"
"I quite lost count," Dis admitted. "If you are wondering how best to introduce yourself in the future, the poetry amused me. Once I realized that you must have written it all based on Thorin's appearance, since you had never seen my likeness."
Flushing crimson, Bilbo felt as though she'd yanked the bedsheets away to reveal he was completely nude. "I do not. That is to say, Balin told me your shad features, but it isn't as though I sit around thinking up ways to describe Thorin's eyes." Smirking with evident amusement, Dis said,
"One would think such an unrepentant flatterer would be a better liar."
"Then it is a good thing I am neither," Bilbo sniffed. "It is not a lie to express oneself with a little flair."
"Of course it isn't," Dis said in a soothing motherly tone. "As I said, I quite liked your poetry. Tell me, though, what colour is heather? I confess I do not know much of gardening."
Blood rushed away from Bilbo's face, and he felt himself grow very pale. "I never said that one aloud." 'Neath midday sun, elves and men did yield to the strength behind the oaken shield. They could not best on a battlefield, those old wounds begging to be healed. Black not as midnight was his hair, for it shone like a raven's feather. Every colour seen was mirrored there, from the roses to the heather.
'Twas by light of stone in hallowed hall that he justly answered ancestral call, to rule as it was before the fall, and serve his people, one and all. And black not as night was his hair, since it shone like a raven's feather. Every colour I have ever seen was there, from the roses to the heather. In the dark his sword did glow, as Orcrist vanquished goblin foe. None might stand against his might, when he wielded Gondolin's light. Black not as midnight was his hair, which shone like a raven's feather. Every colour seen was mirrored there, from the roses to the heather. Yet in morning's sun I loved him best. That is when the crown could rest, breaking his fast in quiet with me, for as long as fate might let us be.
It was utterly mortifying, badly written drivel. The chorus of a ridiculous ode to Thorin that Bilbo would never, under any circumstances, speak aloud, no matter how damaged his brain had been. For pity's sake, the concluding verse was about their breakfasts together. The meaning he found in those morning meals was even more private than his lurid admiration for the dwarves' long dresses. Please, I beg of you, tell me that I did not sing it! Clearly, there was a cruelty in this that had not passed to her children, for she laughed and did not answer Bilbo at all for a full minute.
Nay, she said at last, I did not know it was a song at all, or that you wrote ballads for my brother.
I do not write no ballads to anyone! Bilbo shrieked frantically. Shushing him gently so that he would not endanger his healing, she promised to keep any suppositions she may have made about poetry or songs of every kind to herself. I may on occasion pull together a lyric or two describing my friends, he admitted eventually, once he had sworn her to secrecy. Some day I will write a book about my adventures, and I expect your brother may feature in it.
I expect quite heavily,
she said knowingly. Rushing to change the subject, Bilbo asked where Thorin and the rest of the company were, if they had gone back to Erebor, and if the other dwarf who had travelled with this intended to make their way there soon. He left the question of why none of his friends had stayed in place of a woman he did not recognize unasked. Somehow Dis knew the answer he really sought, because she gave it to him first.
It hurt them all too much to stay, she said quietly. They smiled for you so that you would not be upset, but every time it was clear you did not know one moment from the next. Their hearts broke with fear and worry. Even Oin, who has seen many more serious injuries, could not bear to speak with you for long. So I vowed to remain in Dale until you were well enough to return to the mountain.
That was very kind of you, but now that I am better, you needn't be literal about it. You have waited long to see your home again. Go now, I will be well looked after, and join you soon enough.
I will return to Erebor, Dis said regally, when the injury I do to you, saviour of my eldest son, has healed.
She said it with such an air of finality that Bilbo knew. If he had not woken from his confusion, she would not have walked the halls of her longed-for home. Stupidly normal dwarves always managed to break his heart a little. She was so very like her brother. He resolved to heal as quickly as possible.